I want to thank you all for coming. It's, I know, a beautiful night outside, and we all appreciate you coming and registering for this program. As many of you know, Harriet Shenkman, she was, this is not the first time she's been with us, so we're really thrilled to have her back. She is a professor emeritus of CUNY, which is the City University of New York, and she serves on the advisory board of the Women's National Book Association in New York City. Her poetry awards include the Women's National Book Association 2013 Poetry Writing Contest, the Women Who Write 2013 International Poetry, Rain's Poetry Competition. Her poetry appears in many literary journals and magazines. So please welcome Harriet. Before I continue, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat function. Forgot to say that first. Okay, so now please welcome Harriet.
Thank you so much, Joan, and thank you so much for hosting this event. We really appreciate you and the Chappaqua Library for being so gracious to us. I am so pleased to have my writing colleagues, Carolyn Leavitt and Susan Henderson, with us today. I will only give a brief summary of their resume, which I could go on for an entire page. Carolyn Leavitt is the New York Times best-selling author of 12 novels. Carolyn, I didn't know that, 12, including Pictures of You and the Good Morning America online pick, With or Without You. She is a book critic for People and AARP, and she has a column in Psychology Today. And I know that her latest book has come out in paperback, and she's going to be sure to tell you about it. Susan Henderson is a Hawthornian International Fellow, a 6-time Pushcart Prize nominee. Wow, what an honor. And the recipient of an Academy Awards Poets Award. She's the author of the novel Up from the Blue and The Flicker of Old Dreams. And I think she's in the process of writing another novel, if I'm not mistaken, and she will tell you about it. So now I'll turn the program over to Carolyn, who's going to talk about how the pandemic affected her writing and perhaps read a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that lovely intro. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be here with Sue Henderson, who's a friend of mine. Okay, so picture this. This is my book, With or Without You, which was due to come out in August 2020. Oddly enough, it's about a disruption of life, which I couldn't have imagined was going to happen with a pandemic. It's about a midlife couple in their 40s who are arguing one night, and they're drinking, and there's some drugs, and in the morning, Simon, the guy, wakes up, and Stella, his partner, does not. She goes into a coma. And when she comes out of the coma, she has this startling new talent, which actually I researched, which can happen. And it's something that alters all of their lives forever. So my first event on my book tour was in March of 2020. I was supposed to fly down to Houston and speak in front of 100 librarians. I was so excited. I memorized this whole speech, right, with the hand movements and everything. And the day before I was to fly down there, my publicist called me and he said, "I'm sorry, everything's canceled now. There's a pandemic." And I was panicking. I mean, this is my book. This is my baby. I worked 6 years on this book. How could everything be canceled? Plus, I was sort of, at that point, I was a little anxious about the pandemic, but people hadn't started suffering or dying. All I thought was, what's going to happen to my book? If you can't tour, if you can't meet readers, if the stores are closing, how are people going to find out about the book? So I walked around the house and I thought, well, I'm going to make a video of my speech and send it to Algonquin, my publisher. And I did, and they liked it. And they said, we're going to use this as promotion. And when they did that, I thought, well, why can't I do this for other people, for friends? So I just put out the word to friends on Facebook. If you have a book coming out now and it's canceled by the pandemic, come talk to me. All you have to do is make a little short video, shout out another author, shout out an indie bookstore, and I'll get it everywhere. I expected 10 people. I ended up getting 200. I was so busy making these videos and putting them up that it was like the pandemic was in the background. And it kept building and building until I got a call from Jenna Blum, another author, who said, do you need help? I said, yes. So together we created something for other authors suffering in the pandemic, which is A Mighty Blaze. We were going to start with just interviewing people, promoting their books as they came up. And instead it sort of exploded. It became, now we have like 30 people working for us, and we've got support from the Authors Guild and everything else. And it took up a lot of my time in the pandemic. But now I had to go back to writing. So I pulled back from that a bit to try to write and to try to figure out what to do next. And in a way, the writing saved me because I could block out everything that was happening outside. Plus, my life really wasn't that much different during the pandemic than before, other than the anxiety. I mean, I always stay at home. I work at home. My husband's at home. I'm an introvert, so it was fine for me. But now I have to worry about promotion of the paperback, which is coming out on June 29th. And oddly enough, it's been actually easier for me because everything is on Zoom. You can pull up like 4 events at once, instead of having to fly from place to place. I'm just now starting to figure out how my writing is going to go post-pandemic, and how it's going to impact what I'm writing about next. And I'm not sure yet. So I want to read you a little bit from my book. I'm going to read you the part about Stella and coma, since being in the pandemic for a lot of people was like everything stopped, and it was similar to a coma. So here we go. This is from chapter 3. Stella floats. She doesn't have a body, though she knows it's there, apart from her on this bed. She can hear Simon talking to her, although she can't make out the words. The rise and fall of his voice confuses her. It's rich and almost gravelly, the way it had been when he was still in his 20s, when she had first met him, and he still was smoking. Simon now says something to her more urgent, but she can't make out a syllable. Grr, it sounds like. Even though she can't understand him, his voice soothes her. It's real and known and familiar. Simon, my Simon. She wants to tell him how sorry she is that they argued. It was her cold plucking up her sinuses. How funny. Here in this place, which she doesn't know whether it's being alive or not alive, she doesn't have her cold anymore. Here in this place, isn't aware of her body and its functioning, breathing, sweating, peeing, they all seem part of another life, something she used to do but doesn't do anymore. Wave bye-bye body, she thinks. The thought of it makes her laugh. Mostly what she can do right now in this state is smell things. Something sharp like lemons whisks by her nose. Wait, she wants to say, please wait. But the scent fades and vanishes before she can really lock onto it. She hears sounds and she perks with interest. Feet pat on the floor, voices dip and rise and grow. I'm here, she wants to say to Simon, to anyone who's there. I'm right here. She feels so sorry for him when she hears him crying. She can feel where he is by the heat of the room moving closer to her, warming her. She can hear it too, little skips in his voice, a loss of control. She wants to touch him, but she can't. She wants to say, it's okay. Don't worry, baby, she thinks. but she's never once called him baby in her other life. Don't worry, he's crying harder. He's not a crier. She's the one who weeps when they argue, who even tears up at that phone commercial in which the college kid calls his parents to finally tell them he loves them. The only other time she has known him to cry was in front of his father. Sometimes she panics. Right now, for example, her mind goes numb with terror. This can't be happening. This isn't real. I have to get out of here, out of this body. It's as if this crazy state was the real world and everything she had lived before it was a fake world. She feels like she's in a TV show, like she's wrapped in layers of cotton and there's an audience watching her. What happened to her? When did it happen? She remembers only shards. She had a cold. She took a Sudafed. Maybe she took 2 Sudafed. Did she take 3? She remembers Simon was going to talk to her about something important. She smells Simon's hair and she wants to touch it, but she can't lift her hand. Something is brushing against her skin, something soft. Something is floating. And then she realizes once again, what's floating is her. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. It's really unique to hear about a protagonist who was in that kind of situation. And in many respects, it's like the situation we were first in the pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I go back to a year before. I mean, we can look upon it now because it's a year later and we've probably all been vaccinated and it's a totally different situation. But back then, I felt very isolated and confined in the pandemic. I had to stay in my apartment by myself, and it brought out all kinds of themes for new poetry. That's exactly what happened. And themes of aloneness, of having to have grit in a situation, reflection about oneself, and also about death and mortality. And above all, for me, the humorous side. In order to survive, one has to look at the humorous side of everything. So I'd like to read a few poems that sort of reflect these different things that were inspired, if I might say, by this horrible situation. The first one is kind of about aloneness, and it made me reflect about my childhood. And it's called Canary Yellow Kitchen. Alone at my granite counter, I am haunted by the formica table in the canary yellow kitchen of my childhood. Sitting at the table, wedged between the stove and the window, I was forced to stare at the neighbors' undershirts hanging stiffly on the clothesline. I barely glanced at my plate filled with a well-done slice of meat and a side of green beans. A round fluorescent light shone down on my father at one end, celebrating a ripe cantaloupe, and my mother at the other end, bemoaning the weather. Me squeezed in between, wishing I could run out and play with a little sister I never had.
Wonderful.
So just being locked in there made me think of that experience. And here's my trying to be gritty. It's called Mozart's Requiem. I pull the faded jeans off the bar, the scarf of white and black stripes, and sprinkled with lilacs, cotton nightgown of powder blue. Underneath, a ghostly machine appears. Treadmill, they call it. I will summon grit in my confinement, a slow rhythm at first, pacing myself. I saw and sweat, running slightly uphill to Mozart's Requiem in D minor. And a little bit of reflection too, in this time by myself. It's called, You Need to Know This About Me. I toss the fork in the spoon drawer, mix $5 bills with ones and tens, estimate the weather, sometimes forget to floss, wear mismatched undies, use disposable masks more than once, to disinfect every surface, spell words recklessly, not sure my inexactitude qualifies as living on the edge, but you need to know this about me.
It's wonderful.
And then this one is called Small Gesture. In this time of the pandemic, we can only meet and walk apart. No hand holding or dancing to a tango beat. As a small gesture, under a layer of faded jeans and hooded quilt jacket, I wear my black undies, the panty with sheer square of lace on either side, tiny satin ribbon at the waist, and matching uplift bra. You are free to look into my eyes from 6 feet away, blink, and just imagine.
That's wonderful.
And one last one, which I started thinking about my mortality, and I wanted to have a sense of humor about it rather than be totally mournful. This is called Daylilies, Please. I rifle through drawers and file cabinets. Last will, healthcare proxy, apartment lease, car insurance, burial plots, CVS coupons, life insurance, staple rewards, tax returns, Victoria's Secrets credit, debit card, key to deposit box, Fantango gift card, good until 2023. Can't imagine what it would be like without me around. I envision less poetry and matzo bride, more legal briefs and chicken fajitas. Have no preference for burial clothes or casket. I do favor my black sheath with crisscross back, and pine has a pleasant scent. No particular god or rabbi required, though I have a burial plot in the Jewish section, and saying Kaddish once wouldn't kill you. Decorations unnecessary, although a photo of Mrs. Stoll's knishes on Coney Island Avenue would make me feel at home. And dear ones, try to remember, I'm partial to daylilies and a Leonard's Hallelujah.
It's lovely.
Wonderful.
So those are my poems that, and in trying to deal with the pandemic, I also started drawing and drew different things for a collection that I'm trying to put together called the Corona Collection, which I haven't yet finished. And one more thing, I also wrote a novel of 350 pages, and I started looking at it and looking at it. And I started on the task of changing the entire novel from third person to first.
Oh,
And you can imagine what kind of job that would be. Carolyn knows.
horrible.
So that's
Nightmare.
my story in the pandemic. And now I'd like to turn it over to Susan.
Okay, I'm gonna scoot you guys closer and turn you up just in case. Okay, so I feel like in bringing up the rear, I can talk to those of you who have not been very productive during the pandemic, because I felt like if you had told me that there was going to be a pandemic, I would have been like, this, this is my jam. I'm an introvert. I only need more time. I'm a workaholic. I just felt like if you could just tell me not to attend any events for a year and just be by myself, I thought I would do that really well. And then there's reality. So at the very beginning of the pandemic, my father died. And then I went down the next day to be with my mom, who was alone and just kind of learning to grieve together. And we were grieving in masks and 6 feet apart. And then I broke my hand. And I lost 2 friends and 1 child of a friend to suicide this year. So the year has had weight to it. And then on top of that, the pandemic that we've all been experiencing together, whatever your personal circumstances are, I don't know how it is for you, but for me, it's been my 4 walls of my house and kind of pacing in my yard and pacing in the little same places with a mask on. And if I pass someone on the street, I cross the street. So we're on the opposite side. And I've been doing Instacart, and I've been thinking that I was going to work on my novel and thinking I was going to produce in all this isolation. And what I've found is the thoughts don't come, and I don't feel like the spark is there. And I find that I really miss the accidents and the chance encounters of riding on a bus, of bumping into someone in the grocery store, of having a fender bender, of all the little things that can entirely change your mood and your day, and the conversations you overhear, and the way someone smells when they pass you. And I find that for me, a writer without all those tools, all those senses, I feel like I'm in this kind of dull space of not being inspired. And what I'm trying to learn is that that's okay, that I'm starting to kind of rethink how much I felt my productivity was tied to my identity and my self-worth. I've been trying to kind of rethink how I spend my time and what I write for. And so when we talked about doing a little bit of a reading tonight, I decided I wanted to reconnect to that feeling I had as a writer before there were expectations about me, when all the reason that I wrote was about the urgency, and I had to tell a certain story, and I was only writing because I needed to write, whether someone saw or not. So I remembered before I wrote my first book, there was an image I kept waking up with over and over, that at some point I realized if I wrote it down, I had always been a poet, and I knew if I wrote it down, it was going to be something long that I didn't know how to do. And I thought, I had this girl standing outside of her mother's bedroom door, and I knew if she opened it, I was going to fall into the whole story of it. And so I'm going to read that because I need to find that place again where I'm back in that kind of a story. So this is from my first book, Up from the Blue. I was barred from school for the day because I'd been biting again. Whenever I pressed my teeth into one of my classmates, my teacher stopped the lesson and called, "Tilly, Tilly." There was always a struggle as she tried to wrestle the hand or arm from my mouth, but I held on, fighting until the last string of spit released. because I like to leave a mark. Although I had nowhere to go, I got up early and sat on the front steps in my nightgown, knees together, bare feet arched to keep my legs off the cold concrete. American flags rose up the poles and flapped against the Sandia Mountains, pale in the distance as lights popped on inside the little squares of houses in our neighborhood, each the same size with their well-mowed lawns and rectangular flower beds under the front windows. Soon the men from each home walked tall and purposefully out their doors, one after another in their crisp blue uniforms or camouflage jumpsuits, all with the same haircuts, the same pair of glasses. Some, like my father, had more decorations on their uniforms, but from this distance, I noticed the sameness, and I'll skip a bit. My brother rushed out of the garage door, trying to close his lunchbox without dropping his textbooks. He stopped beside me to see why his lunchbox wouldn't latch, opening the lid and shifting the jar of green olives and the 2 hot dog buns inside. "You have to slam it," I said. He did, and it bent, the lid, but closed shut. "Did you check on Mama?" I asked. Phil shook his head. Our mother had not left her bedroom in 4 days. The last time she'd come out was supper time, the night Dad left for his business trip. She said she felt too tired to cook and handed us a box of chocolate donuts before shutting her door. She was so tired these days. I wasn't surprised when we didn't see her the next morning. Phil made sure we left for school on time, and when we didn't see her leave the bedroom by supper time the next evening, we opened the door just a crack. The room smelled strong and sweet, like rotting flowers, and Phil shut the door again, saying we should wait for Dad. My brother gripped the handle of his lunchbox, sitting too straight the way Dad taught him, as students continued to stream past our house on their way to school. "Do you think we should tell someone about Mama?" I asked. He only shook his head back and forth. "Dad will be home tonight," he said. "We should just wait." He kept his eye on the passing students, and when he spotted a 5th grader from his class, he jogged to catch up, the jar of olives banging back and forth again inside his lunchbox. I'm going to skip to where she's standing. She decides to go back inside, and she's standing outside her mother's bedroom. I pressed my nose and lips against her door, felt the wood dampen with my breath, while I gradually turned the handle. The blinds were drawn, the smell overpowering as I felt my way through the sticky air to her bed. She lay there pale and beautiful, as if drowned and washed back ashore, her face blank. She'd covered the bed in books, 5 of them spread out across Dad's side. She once told me she liked to read the first chapters and then dream the rest. Perhaps she was just dreaming right then. In the quiet, I heard the gurgle of steam moving through the pipes and the swoosh, swoosh of blood in my ears. My fingers touched the sheet, and I considered saying her name, but suddenly feared she'd open her eyes, blue as robin's eggs, the fat black pupil tracking me. And which mother would she be? And that's that.
Breathtaking.
That's beautiful, beautiful. So I think we're open to questions now, or Joan, are you going to?
Right.
Hi,
Right.
Joan.
Right now, there are no questions. They'll come up, but we do have lots of compliments from everybody on the chat function. It's so interesting. For all of you who might not remember, the name of this program was Writing During the Pandemic, Revision, Reflection, and Zoom, of course. So it was interesting how each one of you approached this topic. And it's just interesting to me to hear this, because usually when we do a program, it's one author and they do their speech and whatnot. But it's, the internal strife some of you went through to get here, and how you channeled your energies into different ways. I was laughing, I want you to know, Harriet, at some of your poems, because they, we're still at the tail end of this pandemic, and it's nice to be able to just get away from it all. So thank you. And to think of what, Caroline, what you did in forming this group, That's, you hear about a lot of businesses that have occurred, and it was great to hear that. And I enjoyed hearing that. And I enjoyed, Susan, the struggles that you went through. I got to relate to all of that. I missed a lot of that myself. So it was wonderful. The one thing I just wanted to say is we didn't discuss, Susan, your a little bit of your bio before. We did discuss what Caroline's was. I just want everyone to know she's an international Hawthornden International Fellow, a 6 times Pushcart Prize nominee, and the recipient of an Academy of American Poets Award. And so this is a very impressive group of authors. So I hope you all enjoyed it. Again, we're just getting compliments, no questions. People seem really excited and impressed by all this. So
well, maybe we have questions for each other. I don't know.
That would sound like a good idea. So Harriet, do you want to moderate that?
Sure. I'll start off with a question or just a comment about what you said, Susan, about being in daily life and that inspiring you to write, etc. And you'll laugh at this because I'm taking the comic end of it. I was in Home Goods today and I looked at all the different products that they have and I took notes because I thought there's a great poem in here somehow. And I did not say what I have experienced, which is the negative personal side of things where my husband is in hospice now. He's been this way for, in assisted living for a long time. And this has made it so much worse. And I have written poems about that, but I didn't read them. But I sort of, when I was at Home Goods, there was so many inspirations that popped up about a life I have lost in a certain sense and how to put that together with the dark and the light of it. And I'm going to write about that, and it's going to be called Home Goods. So, I think there is that, that inspiration that you get from, other things, and also the deep inspiration of something that happens to you personally that you want to write about. So I can relate to all of that.
It's interesting. I was thinking about how with the 4 walls and just kind of the sameness. The one thing I really noticed about myself during the pandemic was I got very into Salman Rushdie. I kind of went into like a Salman Rushdie bubble. And I realized I needed to just kind of catapult over the world I was living in and get into this kind of more magical space. And it's the one thing that's really shifted in my novel in progress, which I feel extremely unproductive about, but I have been kind of working with it over the last year. But it took a very hard magical turn, which is very out of character for me, but I needed to be in that different space, and I didn't know how to access the emotions of my novel and the emotions that I needed to feel outside of this kind of numb space without kind of going into this kind of magical space. So it's interesting how we've all kind of, the way you learn to survive your circumstances and the way you learn to thread the dark and the light together into something that you can sit with.
I also think that the whole notion of I think the whole notion of what's daily life for me has changed radically, especially now that we're starting to go back to things. And people seem to think, oh, maybe it'll be like it was before, but I have this real sense that nothing is going to be the way it was before. And that's actually sort of lit a fire in my writing because I'm working harder and fiercer because I keep thinking any moment, something, you never know what's going to happen, which was really what I was writing about in my novel, With or Without You. But now I've sort of seen it in real life. very much attuned to the fact that, grab onto the good moments in your life, grab onto the people you love, and you don't know what's going to happen in the future. Maybe nobody ever knew. Maybe that was always a myth. But to me, that has certainly fueled my writing a lot more.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. And how is your new novel coming? I know you like to write about that on Facebook, Carolyn.
I tend to take Facebook along with me on my novel journey. It's not due to my editor until October. I've got a draft, and I gave the draft to somebody to read, and it's got to be restructured. But the spine of it is there, so it's at that stage where it's really hard. There's really a lot to do, and that's where I'm happiest. I'm fine about that.
And have you been? I see you.
I think we're losing
Okay.
Harriet. You seem to
All
have
the
frozen.
time. So, and I fiction. Hmm? Are we losing?
All right, you're back on.
You're back on now.
Yeah, Carolyn, how do you do that? You seem to be so fantastic at doing all this promotion and talk and everything, and I want to learn from you. You're my role model.
I have a
I
Caroline.
do it from this trick is I'm able to do it at home in a space that I love. I love my house. My husband's right across the hall. I have I just have this intense drive. I've always had it where I feel like I have to make every moment matter. And I'm just so lucky and so grateful that I'm able to be a writer and that's my living that I can make. And I just want to keep feeding into the universe positive things about it and helping other writers. And again, it's just making the most of whatever we have.
There are a couple
That's
of
true.
questions
Joan?
that came,
Okay.
so I thought maybe I would just
Oh, great.
hop in here. And one person in the group wanted to know what we think of the future of the Zoom reading. Since you're all right now involved in a Zoom reading, what do you think the future will be? Anyone want to just comment?
I think it's definitely going to still be a part because first of all, doing Zoom events and Zoom readings is much more economical for publishers. They don't have to fly you out the night before an event. They don't have to pay for your hotel. And when you do that, you can only do one event every 2 or 3 days anyway. And so with Zoom, I've been doing 4 events a day sometimes, and it's not exhausting because I'm still sitting here in my writing studio. So it's very pleasant. I also think the fact that Zoom can be recorded makes it so much easier for audiences because they don't have to be there. There's not the excuse of, oh, it's raining, I don't want to go out to a bookstore. You can watch it at 3 in the morning. I think it's a good thing.
I think it's a good thing.
I do too.
We've been able to attend Zoom readings, in like in Oregon or New Zealand, over the pandemic, and that's been great. The flip side, what I really miss about real life is that during the pandemic, part of my blah, I'll just keep talking about my blah, but the kind of numb feeling is everything with Zoom is like you stay on topic and you're scheduled and we're meeting from 7 to 8 and stuff. And I feel like the great moments in life and what I love about going to a reading in person is you're nervous and you walk in with someone that you didn't know and you become a part of a conversation, or you leave together and you end up in a cafe together, and the night becomes something entirely different than what it set out to be. And so what I hope is that we have more Zoom because it's an economical way to kind of include B-level authors and everything in the mix. But I also really can't wait to get back in, into Brooklyn and into a bookstore, and the steam of a summer evening, and everybody's like sweating, and I miss all of that.
Do you remember I first met you in Greenwich Village?
Yes.
You were reading at the cafe, which is defunct and no longer exists. So part of it, no. So part of it is that a lot of venues don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
true.
Right.
I just want to mention that the libraries, most of the people in a library listserv, we've been debating about this, and we feel that mostly there will be some kind of hybrid program, because we know that most people especially want to purchase books when they hear the author, and then they want them personalized, and it's a different situation. As Susan was saying, it's just completely different, and they do want to have that personal picture maybe with the author, or a personalized book. And so we're all investigating, at least in the Westchester library system, how to do it. Excuse me. There's another question, and this one says, to Carolyn specifically, a Mighty Blaze only interview. Does Mighty Blaze only interview debut authors whose release date is on a Tuesday? I don't quite get that.
Yeah, we have Tuesday as Pub Day when we promote all the authors who publish on Tuesday. Most major publishers publish their books on a Tuesday for some reason. Nobody knows why. They just do. There are some big publishers who do publish novelists on another day. There are some small publishers who do. It's we just don't have the bandwidth to promote everybody, so it's a case by case situation. What I would suggest is go to the website, almightyblaze.com, and go to For Authors, and there's a form to fill out, and fill it out, and then you're a publisher. And I'm not in charge of who gets promoted and who doesn't, but you have a shot, so you should do that.
We have another question. First of all, another compliment, what a fantastically talented group, each with their own voice. I realize this discussion pertains to the pandemic, but the election and subsequent insurrection, insurrection is what finally knocked me off the writing rails. Any tips for the contending with events such as sorry, it keeps jumping as people type in questions. Any tips for contending with events such as these, and once again reigning in the concentration?
Well, I'd like to answer that in one respect, and that's my novel is about Israel and the underlying powder keg that it is. And I've been writing that for a long time, and all of a sudden the events followed my novel, in the sense that for a long time it was very quiet, and all of a sudden all that the threat that people have been living on and the conflict has come out into the open. And so, I don't know if novels that deal with political or real situations have a chance of being heard, but it's certainly a topic, or various topics that should be themes of novels.
And that sort of leads into this final question. How do you think, or do you think, the themes or types of stories presented in upcoming novels will be influenced by the pandemic? One question. And the second, well, I'll say it again. Does anyone want to talk about the types of stories presented in the upcoming novels will be influenced by the pandemic?
Well, there's a lot of novels out already about dystopias and.
Sorry, there's an ice cream truck going down my street.
And that kind of stuff. My issue with that is that it depends on what you want to write and what you want to read. I I was here when 9/11 happened. My son was 5. He saw the towers fall. I never wanted to read anything about 9/11 again because I felt that I lived through it. Right now, I feel like I don't know how I'm going to feel about writing about the pandemic because I lived through it. I don't know how other writers feel. How do you feel, Susan?
I think this question sort of bridges together with the previous question, which is there was a question about sort of the abuser in chief and the how it was, you know, taking the, you know, our concentration, and you know, just getting gaslit every day and then feeling like then you could go off and write. I think for me, you honor the fact that you're changed by events, and it will change you molecule by molecule, and that will change your writing. I definitely felt like the pandemic turned my head in a different direction. I was working with the same material in my novel, but I decided to kind of take a different slant at it. And I think it's good to just keep adapting. Your writing adapts, and you adapt as a human as you survive each thing. So you don't necessarily have to be writing about the pandemic, but the pandemic does work itself through you and change your lens on the world. And then sometimes, like with Harriet, you get lucky, and Harriet, send your novel out to publishers right now. When you get lucky and you hit the your topic lines up with history, you wanna like send it out.
One of the,
I want to just mention something that Carolyn said before that I relate to and think. I think we all will feel a little bit insecure from now on.
Mm-hmm.
And for both those reasons, the pandemic and the craziness of our government. It, like, we never thought anybody like that person would, I won't even mention his name, would ever be elected to our government. As what happens in our government is something in our lifetime we never conceived of, and the pandemic too in our lifetime. So there's always this sense of insecurity that anything can happen, and that's what Carolyn said before, right?
and that again leads into this next part of the question. What important message can you as writers give to readers after having experienced the pandemic these past 14 months? Any special message that you think would help?
Make the most of every minute. Tell the people you love that you love them. Be kind. Be kind.
Yes.
And I think it humbles you, and it makes you tender about what other people go through, and how paper thin life can feel sometimes, you know.
And have gratitude, even though sometimes it feels pretty bad, but try to think of the positive and the light versus the dark.
There was one person who wrote kind of, I'll just read what she wrote. My husband died in December 2019, and the pandemic came shortly thereafter. What I found was that the time alone was in many ways good for me and enabled me to complete the history/memoir on which I have been working for over 20 years. The painful absence was that of my children and my grandchildren.
Oh.
So
Yes,
I think
that's Joan. Yeah.
She channeled her pain into art. That's great.
Right. And I think you've all touched on that subject during this discussion. So we're just about out of time. And so this worked out very well. And I thank you all for your time and effort in putting it in. And just to those people who are here, you might want to recommend this videotape to friends, because this is probably the only program we've ever had on the pandemic, post-pandemic at the library, with skirting on other issues instead. What political issues, Harriet, that you touched but we haven't really explored this as much as maybe we should. There's a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists doing programs, but somehow writers have a different insight that many of us appreciate, because you could put it down on words and just in sentences, and we need that. So I
And
thank
I'm so, I just want to say thank you so much, Carolyn and Susan, and I'm so glad that you agreed to participate. And I really do think it's great that we were all so different and that we all had a different, totally different perspective on it, and yet had some similarities.
Thank
Right.
you so much. And thank you, Susan, and thank you, Joan, and thank you everybody who showed up. I really appreciate it.
And thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any last minute comment? Nope. All right, so thank you all for coming, and please visit the Chappaqua Library website, which is chappaqua.library.org. Goodbye,
We'll be
everyone.
in touch,
Stay
Joan.
safe.
Bye.
Okay,
Right.
bye.